At FIE, we're not just
students
and faculty.
We're not only learners
and lecturers.
We are expanding minds,
expanding futures.
We're redefining the classroom.
We are life-changing.
Eye-opening. We are a community
driven by our values
that wants you.
You.
Yes, you.
To join.
Hello and welcome to In the Field, a podcast from FIE, where we will be exploring all things study abroad. I'm Dr. Heidi James Dunbar, writer in residence and senior faculty, and I will be your host. Joining me today is Angela Schaefer. Angela Schaefer is the Executive Director of the Fund for Education Abroad. An international educator, grants professional and entrepreneur, Angie holds a Master of Arts degree in International Education Policy. Throughout her studies and career, Angela has focused on creating opportunities for historically excluded students and connecting international educators with US classrooms. She has written about the value of experiential learning and exchange and has led education abroad programs and workshops in Japan, India, South Africa, Rwanda, and Mauritius. Angie is based in her hometown of Baltimore, Maryland. Hi, Angie. Thank you so much for joining me on In the Field.
Thank you so much for having me, Heidi.
I would love to hear more about the work on the impact, most importantly, of the FEA.
So, well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about the Fund for Ed Abroad. Fund for Ed Abroad, FEA, not FIE. Sometimes people are like, wait, which one? We are a scholarship organization. We are coming up on our 15th year, providing scholarships to students who have been historically marginalized and excluded from study abroad. So we started in 2010, and we have thus far provided, with the announcement of our recent cohort, we provided more than 1,200 students with scholarships to study abroad through over $4 million in funding and resources, which we're really, really proud of. That's a huge just a huge amount of coverage for the work that we've done. We are a small organization, and so it's just 3 of us full-time as staff folks, and then we have an intern or 2 interns sometimes, but we have an amazing board of trustees, super dedicated people, not just from higher ed or international ed, but also from lots of different fields, business. We have medical professionals, entrepreneurs, DEI advocates and consultants. So lots of different people represented. And we also have our access partners, and FIE is one of them. And our access partners also very much make our work possible.
Oh, that's fantastic. What's the relationship with the access partners?
Access partners are typically organizations in international education, study abroad program providers that provide us with funding for scholarships for students going on their programs, but also funding to keep our operations going, keep our marketing going, keep our programming for alum of FEA possible. So our access partners are investing in the work of FEA beyond scholarships for students going on their programs. They're also making sure that we can really see through our mission of supporting students before, during, and after study abroad. We have provided more than 1,200 scholarships for study abroad, but we've worked with, I would say, probably 10,000 students or more, just guiding them through study abroad processes, finding scholarships, understanding the finances of education abroad. And so our access partners really are partners in the truest of ways, in that way of making sure we're investing in students and making study abroad possible for them, even if it's maybe not through our scholarships, but through a way that we're working with them to support them through the application process and program discovery.
Yes, that's really quite comprehensive what you're providing then. Yeah.
Yes, it's a big lift for a small team, but we really do feel like this is the work that will allow Ed Abroad to be more diverse moving forward. We feel like we get a lot of information from students who are applying to our programs that we can relay to the field about what students see as the barriers to going abroad. Our stats really do kind of flip the script on who studies abroad. More than 80% of our students are people of color. More than 70% of the students are first generation college students, and over 30% are community college students. And as you know, that's just not, those are not the stats in study abroad for US students. So we're really proud of that. But because those are the students we're working with, we feel like we get a lot of information from them, and they feel comfortable, I think, talking with us because we've really made it visible, and it is in the optics of FEA that we truly believe that study abroad will be a better experience for everyone involved if it is more diverse.
Absolutely. That it's essential work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I would really love to hear more actually about sort of the place of scholarships in study abroad, the availability and accessibility actually, and the awareness that people have, and how they can become more aware of that availability.
Yes, so scholarships, there are not enough of them out there, I think, to really truly make study abroad reflective of the US student population. However, I think, the way that FEA fits into the landscape of scholarships, and the way that at least I think about it, are we're part of it, right? We're not trying to actually duplicate what the work of the Gilman is, or what the work of Boren is, or Freeman, or even smaller scholarship organizations that I've become more aware of, like in that are state specific or region specific, or a Rotary scholarship, right? I think that scholarships work best when we are complementing each other and bringing different students in rather than focusing on the same students. And a lot of that comes down to, I think, how scholarship organizations really look at the ways that they are, that what their mission is, and then on the flip side of that, how they are implementing like a rubric to assess if the students getting their scholarships are the ones that their mission really hopes to get abroad, right? So we have sort of taken a different, FEA has taken a different stance on like how to assess need. And we know that we're doing it a little differently than other organizations. And I think that's really important because, again, if we're just giving awards to the same cohort of students, it's not really fully I think diversifying Ed Abroad, right? We're just giving students to, maybe if we're assessing need as a big part of that, and other organizations are also using need, well then the same students might be getting the same pots of funding, and then there's this huge middle on the spectrum of students in terms of need that might not be able to access funds. So we're trying to think about, scholarship wise, how we can make sure students all along that spectrum have opportunities, right? And so that's where I think, as a very specific part of the field in Ed Abroad, thinking about scholarships from how do we get students their merit scholarships, maybe for students who don't have financial need, but otherwise might be underrepresented in Ed Abroad. And then there are students, there are scholarships that are fully need based and maybe blind to other kinds of things, may not even ask for a transcript, things like that. And I really feel like the landscape of scholarships, if we all work together in that way to make sure we're doing different things, that is where we're going to see the most in terms of results, and really actually creating access and sort of widening who feels not only like they not only who does go abroad, but rather who feels like there are resources for them to pursue this opportunity, right? Because you might have like a student with no need, but they're just they're a commuter student. They have never left their hometown. Their family doesn't really want them to leave, and they're facing in some ways some different sort of barriers and obstacles than a student who may be from a family that has traveled frequently to see family overseas or something like that, and is very high need in terms of if you're using FAFSA or other kinds of ways to assess that, but they feel very comfortable going somewhere. It's just that it's the financial piece. So one of sort of the tenets of FEA, one of the things that really drives the work that we do is we try to figure out how can we really fit in on that spectrum of scholarship provision and assess things differently so that we are really living our mission of widening access to ed abroad. And I think scholarships are just one part of it. One of the best sort of outcomes, I think, of this past year of our Access Advisory Board. So there's a board that all of our access partners work on together, and it's such a fascinating and great space because these are typically competitors if you're looking at ed abroad as a field, right? These are people vying for some of the same students. And then we all get together in these meetings and just everyone is behind this mission to get more students abroad. And it's okay if it's on your program or on none of our programs, but we want to make sure that we are getting students into this experience so that they become the leaders we can trust tomorrow, become our employees that are really well-rounded in the future. And so the Access Advisory Board this year has talked about a project that we're hoping to pursue in the coming months about financial literacy for students. And I think that's a big part of the making ed abroad affordable and widening access, right? There is scholarships. We certainly play a role in that, but a lot of it is also, I think, maybe ways that the field could provide more in terms of making sure students understand the finances behind ed abroad, how aid transfers. Busting myths is a really big part of this work, I think, that students say, oh, it's so much cheaper for me to go on this like week-long program. And then you and I know in reality, actually, none of their aid will apply, none of their aid will transfer. If it's halfway around the world, the airfare is going to be, more than the cost of actually being on the ground in that country for a week. And the student has to take time off of work. Maybe there's a semester opportunity where all of their aid would transfer. Maybe they could work while they're there. Maybe they could, maybe it's a semester that covers their housing or something like that. So it's really interesting to, I think about the ways that it's not just, I think scholarships are one way of hopefully widening access, but I think there are a lot of other things in the way that we work that we could make costs more transparent and really educate students in a way financially that they understand budgeting and things like that, that also will play into, I think, ultimately widening access and diversifying ed abroad.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because there are so many sort of hidden obstacles that if you have some privilege, which I certainly do, we're not always aware of those obstacles that are a hindrance to others. And like you say, it might not even be the finances, it might be really not having any sense of how you can begin a process of application or how do you get this visa, because it can all seem really quite overwhelming if you come from, say, a first generation student to even gone to university. It's tough even just getting into a university, let alone then thinking, right, I'd love to have a semester studying abroad. It can feel insurmountable, but it isn't, right?
No, it's not. And we hear that all the time, Heidi. Like I'll talk to students in the interview phase, for example, of this most recent round, where I was relating to a student that I was also a first generation college student, and the student was a first generation college student at a community college where there wasn't a study abroad office, right? I think there are so many things that many of us who have worked in the field for a long time or have had the privilege of working at institutions where there's very structured sort of study abroad and it's talked about in, your orientation programming and things like that. We just start to think that it's really just a part of the 4-year experience. But we work with a lot of students at FEA where they're first generation college students. They're at a community college, they're at an institute, they're commuting, they're working, they're paying rent. They don't have a study abroad office. Maybe there's one person on campus that put up a flyer for a program, right? And it says, come to my office. And the person's like, I don't know, you sign up for the program. And that's about the extent of the study abroad advising. And that's not to knock on the institution, right? Every institution, we're seeing institutions closing all over the place in the US for lack of resources. One thing they're probably not going to necessarily resource is a study abroad or international office. So I was talking to the student who's a first generation student, and I was explaining, like, in my own experience, my family, they were really supportive, but they were just like, you made it to college, like, you want to make it more complicated and like go elsewhere. And the student was also saying same thing about their family, right? Like, they got to college and it was like, that wasn't a big enough hurdle. Like, you got there, now you want to leave, what are you doing? And I think we hear that sentiment from students sometimes that will pull us back into kind of this reality check of like, this is not the minority necessarily of higher ed students, right? The majority of students enrolled in higher ed in the US right now are what I think previously has been described non-traditional students, but new majority students is some wording that I've also heard, some terminology, and they're over the age of 26, and many students are part-time enrolled. So, I think thinking about the student population outside of who we have, I think, from more privileged positions been able to work with, that is where there's a great space for learning about the populations and how study abroad would really uniquely benefit them. But also making sure we're not just saying, sure, we can work with you, and then really not understanding at a deep level the barriers, the unique barriers they may face. And at FEA, we're really lucky because we have a lot of scholarships that are named dedicated scholarships. So FEA offers over 30 different scholarships, and it's a combination of named, some restricted scholarships, and then our access partner scholarships. And when I say restricted, some of them are by, for example, we have scholarships for students studying certain fields. We have scholarships for students going to certain places in the world. We have scholarships for students from different backgrounds. And so we talk with donors about, setting up scholarship funds. And recently I had a great conversation with a donor as well as an organization about setting up a fund for students with disabilities, right? And the different, again, vast spectrum of students, where some students, they need more, I think, of the support of getting over, like, I can do this. There's a place for me abroad and an organization that will understand my needs and understand how to work with me and understands what it would be like to have my condition overseas. And then there are students who are just like, yeah, no, I'm totally fine to go, but like, I cannot afford, the converter for my wheelchair. I don't know how to act. I really want to go. I'm fine with that. My family supported that. We've traveled abroad in the past, but I don't know how to access an interpreter while I'm abroad. And so, and the expenses then that are part of those questions, right? So setting up that scholarship and really thinking through that, for example, has been a really great learning experience for us in terms of barriers along a spectrum that we, have not necessarily fully considered. And we don't have that lived experience. So we're looking to other people to tell us about that and taking guidance from them.
So it's a really thoughtful and thought-provoking process, this setting up of these many different, and obviously we both really believe and are dedicated our careers to study abroad and education abroad, but I'm really feeling your enthusiasm and love of it. And you said you studied abroad yourself. Was it really very precious to you? Tell me about your time studying abroad.
Absolutely. So I went abroad for the first time. I was super fortunate. I got to go abroad through my high school. And I did not go to an elite prep school. I went to a public school in Baltimore City in the 90s. Not exactly the heyday of education, I think people would agree, for public urban education in the US. But my high school was amazing. And I took German while I was there. And my German teacher was that dedicated person who made sure that if we wanted to go on the exchange program, we hosted German students from Heidelberg in our homes. Which were quite different than many of their homes in Heidelberg, right? They were all over Baltimore City. None of us really came from privileged backgrounds at all. And, we rode the public bus to school. And I mean, they were the most open-minded kids. It was so fun. We were all between like 14 and 17, and we just had so much in common. Even though on the surface we definitely did not, right? My high school was majority Black. And again, we were from all over the city. But the German students were so open-minded and so awesome. And so then we would go stay with them. And my German teacher made sure that finances were not a barrier for us. So I think the Alumni Association helped with it. I think we did a little fundraising, but we basically, for those of us who would have otherwise never have been able to afford airfare or anything like that, my teacher made sure that we had a way to go, and they kept it low cost because it was just like an actual exchange, right? Like the students stayed with us in our homes, and then we stayed with them in their homes, and usually their homes were like about 3 times the size of ours. But it was awesome. And that doing that program, I was like, okay, when I look at schools, I really want to make sure that going somewhere is an option for me. And so I ended up, when I went to undergraduate at a small liberal arts college here, also in Baltimore, Goucher College. And it was not my first choice, but I got a really great scholarship. And I'm so glad I went there. And it's something I actually pull on when I talk to FEA scholars, because, sometimes they're like, well, this wasn't really what I wanted to do, but I can afford it. And, the scholarship is generous. It's going to cover this or that. And I'm like, sometimes the first choice isn't always it's not the only one. And you're going to have a very unique and great educational experience, regardless, probably, of what you do. And so that my Goucher story is very much like that. And I was like, because I'm so close to home, I'm going real far away as much as I can. So I studied abroad in Copenhagen for a semester, and I studied abroad in South Africa for the summer. And those experiences were, they were awesome. I got scholarships for them, thankfully. I did not have any money in college. I was first gen college student. But scholarships really made that possible for me. And yeah, I've been really fortunate to have worked in lots of different places around the world, and traveled a lot more as a result of just working in international ed and exchange. And it's something I feel like has very much changed my outlook and my experiences in life. And I know that it will for a lot of our scholars as well.
Couldn't agree more. It's so enriching in so many ways. Yeah. I have one last question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
And I wanted to ask about the current and future landscapes for students from diverse backgrounds who are looking to fund their study abroad experiences.
I think it's an interesting time. I know we were chatting a little bit about, the growth, sort of the surge in study abroad post-pandemic, and I'm happy to see the numbers, but my eyes, just because of what I do and what I care about so much, always dart to certain parts of the Open Doors report, right? And always asking our access partners, well, what are you seeing? Because there's a lot of identities, I think, that student identities, or students that face unique barriers, I would say, because of parts of their identities that maybe aren't things that we collect data or statistics around, right? And so I think that in terms of just understanding the barriers facing students and understanding why students want to go to certain places and understanding why certain places or certain kinds of programs are growing so much and others maybe aren't, is very key to understanding the data around who is going abroad and who isn't. And I know, for FEA, some of the things that we have really been talking with a lot of our access partners and others in the field about is, we're seeing I think a growth in program numbers in study abroad, which is great. And then you filter it down. It's like, well, where is that happening? Well, there has been a lot of disinvestment from programming in different parts of the world. A lot of our students, we hear them saying, I really want to go here, but there's nothing here, nothing that I could afford here. So I'm going to go here instead. And that's okay. We want to support them. But it's listening to what did you want to do? What are you doing? How are you making that work? And what would you have done maybe if things were different? These are sort of these like 4 questions that come up for us a lot when we talk to scholars. And, making sure that students also understand that, yes, they have maybe a unique opportunity as an undergrad to study abroad. But I think sometimes when we're specifically talking to students from diverse backgrounds, we really emphasize that study abroad piece of undergrad as this sort of one thing they can do. And I've talked to a lot of students who they feel like if they don't do that, they're cut off forever. And maybe part of our work as the field is to also, of course, encourage them and support them when they can go abroad as an undergrad, but also making them allowing them to see that that's not the very end of that potential for them to be abroad in a way that they'll grow and develop professionally, personally, lots of other ways, right? I think in our field, we don't talk a lot about, the different types of opportunities we've even had post undergrad. It's a lot of, especially for this generation that we're seeing of the typical undergraduate age, they've spent some time in their very formative years on a Zoom classroom for at least a year, right? And so I think, opening up different types of programming is going to make a big difference in who goes abroad. Thinking about, are there ways to support students getting master's degrees abroad? Things like that are going to be just as important. Really making sure that students see that there are it's not just this one thing that has to happen at this one specific time. We would love that, but I think diverse students might even come around more to the idea of study abroad if we don't emphasize it only as that opportunity and also talk about it as potentially like part of a pipeline of opportunities in their life that they could pursue. A Fulbright, a master's program abroad, research abroad, things like that. Because I think that is the quickest way that some of them kind of shut down. Okay, I can't make it work right now, which means I'll never make it work. I can't go in, the first semester of my junior year. So it just is something I'll give up on. And I think making sure that students from diverse backgrounds understand that maybe it's a week program or a summer program in undergrad, but it could mean something longer later in life, or you could do a service program or something like that, if you can't graduate on time and fit it in some way. So I think that is a key part of making sure students from diverse backgrounds understand the many opportunities that are out there for them and don't feel immediately cut off from the lingo that we use and try to sell them on with study abroad.
Yeah. That really does sound key. There are many opportunities and not to feel discouraged if the one you've set your heart on isn't the one that's going to work for you. How do students find out more about all of this? Is there your website? And I can direct people to that in the show notes, but how would you recommend students find out more?
Absolutely. We do have a website. It's fundforeducationabroad.org, and that has information for anybody that wants to learn about FEA, not just applicants potentially and scholars, but also donors, also potential access partners, corporate partners, sponsors of events, things like that. So we have a lot of information there. We have pretty fire social media right now, I will say, and I have nothing to do with it. It is all of our interns and our staff, Joelle and Kaylee, who manage that. They're amazing. And that it's a great place to just get updates and reminders about application deadlines, about reviewer opportunities. We rely so heavily on our reviewers. We receive close to 2,000 applications sometimes in a cycle, and it's like I said, 3 of us. So we usually have between 85 and 100 reviewers that support getting us through the application cycles. We couldn't do it without them. So we have information on our social media about that. And then we are around at conferences. We attend several conferences a year, and we're always up for just a phone call with anybody who wants to learn a little more about the work we're doing. We're very proud of it, and we know that we couldn't do it alone. So we're always willing to bring more people into our universe to help us spread the word about FEA.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to me about this. It's been really interesting. I've loved hearing you talk about this with so much passion and really opening up the world of study abroad to as many students as possible. It's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To learn more about our faculty courses and programmes, visit our website www.fie.org.uk. And if you've enjoyed this episode, check out our others wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. FIE provides life-changing study abroad experiences in the UK, Ireland and Spain. As a non-profit educational organisation, we are passionately invested in making a difference for our students as the future global leaders of tomorrow and the field of international education as a whole. The FIE podcast is a creative and academic space for exploring everything, the people, the places and opportunities that make your experience so valuable and exciting.
FIE. We're here to help you
Unlock a wider
brighter future.